Good evening. Welcome to the March 13th, 2018 regular meeting of the Oshtemo Charter Township Board. I'd like to invite everyone in attendance to join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3 is public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone wishing to approach the board?
Yes, I would.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Steve Kinney. I'm with the Oshtemo Rotary. You may have seen me before here. My business is financial planning. I have an office in Oshtemo. I'm with Ameriprise. My partner is Neil Badima, who, by the way, is one of the, I think you call it, on the campaign cabinet for the Drake Farmstead Park. Let me get that correct. So that brings me here. The reason I'm here is because of that. As you know, we've had our Oshtemo Rotary Club and the Township have had a really strong relationship over the last 33 years. As long as I've been here, which is maybe 17 years, with Oshtemo Rotary, we've had this strong relationship of working together and doing fundraisers together and building Oshtemo Township. And we're very proud of that relationship. A few of the members that are here that are even with the Township, Dave, Jim, Deb, Femi's here, Joe, and myself. I don't know if I missed anybody else here, but it's a pleasure to be here. So, just to give you a little bit of background very quickly, we built the Flesher Field picnic shelter. I sometimes call it the pavilion, so if that slips, I don't mean to do that, but it's the Flesher Field Park. Well, I'm going to call it the pavilion for lack of better words. We funded the remodeling of the park pavilion here, and we also funded the remodeling of the Flesher Field Pavilion again when we remodeled the park there a couple years ago. So we have a lot of tie-ins with shelters, it seems. We should be playing some kind of give me shelter thing here. So here tonight, I'm representing Rotary. We are here to make a pledge of $50,000 toward the Drake Farmstead Park Picnic Shelter. And on behalf of all of us at Oshtemo Rotary, we are going to present you with a check for $50,000. Now, before I do that, I'd like to bring up my partner here to say a few words before we do that.
Wow.
And you can ask us questions later.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Oshtemo Rotary Club for their long-time support of Oshtemo Township Parks. And I'm speaking on behalf of everyone that's hosted a picnic, a family reunion, a birthday party, a graduation party, a wedding reception, a company picnic, a Girl Scout or Boy Scout outing, a church picnic, a walkathon, or any other social gathering. You get the picture, in one of our beautiful picnic shelters. And I say, thank you, Oshtemo Rotary. The Rotary mission is to serve others and society, and we are very fortunate that one of the ways that they have chosen to serve Oshtemo is by building and improving our picnic shelters, providing places for people to gather, celebrate, and strengthen our sense of community. We are very grateful for this generous donation of $50,000 to construct a brand new picnic shelter in our brand new Drake Farmstead Park. We expect to build the shelter this fall or next summer, along with trails, interpretive signs, and a gravel parking lot. When the picnic shelter is complete, our new park will be open to the public on a daily basis, and ready for more picnics, family reunions, and birthday parties. In 2011, the Oshtemo Rotary Club donated $17,000 to upgrade our picnic shelter back here at Township Park. It helped us to replace the old asphalt shingle roof with a standing seam metal roof and add some decorative elements to the shelter. And we never got around to putting any kind of plaque on the shelter to recognize that donation. So tonight, we have a nice Rotary plaque that will be hung on the end of the Township Park Picnic Pavilion. And we're going to get a sign underneath that says Oshtemo Rotary Club. So. And we're going to have a little photo op here in just a minute, but I also wanted to thank the Rotary for another thing. They don't just donate to our picnic shelters. Next month, the Rotary is donating the purchase of 20 street trees that will be planted along Millard's Way, which is the new street connector between Parkview Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. And they're going to help plant those, and along with some volunteers. And they're also going to purchase slow-release water bags for all of those trees so that we can keep them alive over the summer. So they don't just help with picnic shelters. They're really serving our community in many ways, and we appreciate that. So, okay, thank you.
Now, you're probably going to wonder, how do we get this money? People just don't come up to us and hand us money. So one of the things we do is we do fundraisers. And one of the big fundraisers we have coming up in May, it's over the Memorial Day weekend. We're going to do we call it a festival, but it's really, I call it a circus, and other people call it some other things. But it is, we did this last year, it was very successful. It has Ferris wheels, rides, people love it. So we're going to do it again this year over at Maple Hill Mall. And I would appreciate anybody that's listening to us or watching us today, and all of you here, that you take the time and spend a few hours over there and help us out. I'd really appreciate it, because that's how we get to where we're at today. Thank you. Now for pictures.
Well, yes, and thank you. What great news.
Wow.
I'm just.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Takes,
All right, we'd like to get a
breath away.
picture if we don't interrupt things too much.
okay, I think they
Do
will
we have time?
come down in front. Yes, we'll do it quickly.
For $50,000.
It's a big check. So where's the camera today?
Here.
Oh.
Not in front of you. No, it wouldn't. I didn't realize you have to look up.
A little bit further over. We're not very well centered.
Is that better?
Well, Deb, can you scoot over just a little bit more and maybe you guys look a little there. Okay. All right, everybody look at me. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
No, so his face. Wow.
Okay, thank you.
And representing Rotary again, I'd like to thank everyone for the plaque for this park here. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you to Rotary very much. It seems to be very good news when Steve's at a meeting. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Item number 4 is the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes, the receipts and disbursements report, the revenue expenditure report, the Drake Farmstead Park Phase 2 budget amendment, NFPA Fire Code 2018 edition, second reading, 2018 meeting updates, purchasing policy amendments, and the Road Commission of Kalamazoo County non-motorized facility umbrella agreements. Is there anyone wishing to remove any of these items from the consent agenda?
I don't want to remove, but I want to bring the board's attention, your NFPA standard that you're adopting. This is only one of the set.
Hearing no requests to remove, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Support.
There's a motion and support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 5-1 and 1 absent. Just for clarification, so you're saying there's multiple books to the code?
No, the NFPA one is the primary code. There are some appendixes to that, but there are other reference materials, but that's the primary code itself.
Okay. Okay, item number 5, consideration of the KL Avenue Future Path Retaining Wall, the MDOT Bridge Project. Public Works Director Elliott, if you could.
Thank you. I believe we discussed previously in the consent agenda, at least I presented you a memo saying that MDOT is proceeding with reconstructing the US 131 bridge over KL Avenue and Amtrak. This is an accelerated project. Early last year, we were informed that MDOT was going to replace the bridge rather than just do a replacement of the deck on top of the bridge. It's been rather accelerated throughout the design. We had some issues with MDOT that we did finally resolve that were focused on allowing us to have space underneath the bridge for a non-motorized facility, as well as the Road Commission was looking for sufficient room to add a center lane throughout the length underneath the bridge. As we proceeded forward, MDOT, in making that space available, we would need to build a retaining wall through the new abutment to the bridge. I will mention that the board has been working on designing this trailway facility, and we always were intending to build a retaining wall through the existing abutment as part of our project at our expense, because it would be a new project through an existing retaining wall. In working with MDOT, they have agreed to redesign their abutments to incorporate this retaining wall, but they have requested that those fees be provided by the local entities. In other words, the extra cost to build that retaining wall, they would like to have committed as they proceed and finalize their designs, so that it go forward as one bid project with the retaining wall. I fully support that. It seems ridiculous to not design it from the get-go, because it would be much more expensive for us to come back when we're ready to build the trailway and actually build the retaining wall at the same time. So I'm recommending that we proceed and make that commitment. MDOT has given us a preliminary cost estimate of $135,245. That is a slightly, they gave us a couple options, and that includes the concrete fascia option that's being recommended by your trailway planning consultants, engineering consultants. I would emphasize there will be future agreements to finalize this commitment, and we have not given up trying to negotiate with the Road Commission as well as with MDOT, because I think there's substantial argument that this should be part of the bridge project, but I don't want to upset, like the Amtrak discussion we had earlier, upset the necessary time frame. We definitely don't want to end up in the situation where we have to come back and build it at a much higher cost in the future. So again, we're kind of being leveraged by our big brother entity to say, this is what it's going to take us to do the right thing, as opposed to just doing the right thing. So again, we're asking the board to allow your supervisor to proceed forward with good faith with MDOT, Road Commission, and others to make sure that this retaining wall is accomplished, with the understanding that at this point, MDOT is expecting us to bear the full weight of the cost, but we're going to try to convince them that they should contribute more than that, or work with the other division of MDOT that provides trailway funding. Maybe they would advance some of the money as part of a trailway project. It's doubtful that that's an opportunity, but we're going to continue to advocate that it shouldn't be all our local costs. But again, we were going to pay for it anyways, but it would have been through a grant fund that we don't have yet available.
Would building this retaining wall at this point provide safer passage for folks until the trailway is built through there?
Absolutely, because yes, it would be like walking along a public right-of-way outside of the paved areas, and it would be relatively smooth. It may even be a gravel base. That would be the ideal, but it would definitely be available to walk across.
And Mark, is the planning on both sides?
This is just on the north side. The facility we would have would be just on the north side. There are additional obstacles on the south side, plus it's actively low areas, wet areas, so that would be problematic in design. As I say, we had already determined before we were informed that the MDOT was going to replace the bridge, we had already determined that on the north side was the ideal location for this facility. As I say, we had a lot of the preliminary design work already done until this basically changed the universe we had to deal with in going forward.
And you said the timeline is expedited. Can you give me a sense of what the timeline is?
My understanding is that they are hoping to get Amtrak's review process, they anticipate would take a year, and then, I know Jamie is here, he may have to correct me here, but my recollection was that they would build the first phase in 2019, which would include building the change orders for the traffic and begin construction of a temporary bridge before they actually did the construction in 2020 for the bridge. And hopefully, Jamie's nodding his head, so yes, I did get my dates right.
Okay, and then we have a plan right now to extend either sidewalks or non-motorized pathways through KL, right?
Yes.
And those timelines won't be affected by this. Those will still move forward? Or are those on hold pending this bridge decision?
They're not on hold. Some of our experience with other trailways is that we feel it's more appropriate time-wise that we have majority of the easements in place before we go forward with MDOT seeking the grant funds. So at this time, we've had meetings with MDOTs. They like the facility. Their grant selection process is obviously statewide for these kinds of grants, but they've told us that they like us to be an applicant. we need to finish the Drake Road projects first, which have taken us a year or more longer than we anticipated. It will probably delayed another year because of the Amtrak crossing. And then Amtrak or MDOT would be looking favorably for us to apply for these funds, but we have not literally applied for them yet.
Right, so none of the KL Avenue sidewalk projects have any allocated funding for them? Is that,
Correct.
or grants?
Correct.
Not any third-party funding. You have appropriated funds to do some design work and initiate the easement acquisitions.
So if we're doing this post the Drake Avenue projects, then the earliest we're looking to have safe passage down KL is in 2022?
I think that's a reasonable time frame. Maybe earlier. There's a remote possibility it could fall together, but I think we're going to be a couple years behind the bridge project.
And what's stopping us from escalating that and not being dependent on Drake? Is it capacity? Is it funding?
Well, the one thing that's been holding it up is this bridge design. So once we know what that design actually is, then we can identify the easements and go after those. And then once that's done, we'll.
Understanding that that would make it, that would make it complete, but there are still a lot of unsafe areas along KL, all the way from 9th to the bridge.
Apartments.
Is there any way that we could start looking at that and acquiring easements prior to, or we know we're going to do it?
Well, I think it's rolling. We're not stopping.
Okay.
I think this bridge slowed the process down, and now I think we're coming through that tunnel. There's light at that end of that tunnel, and so now we can keep moving on the next steps.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? So, Mark, you're looking for,
I'm looking for the board to basically authorize the supervisor with legal counsel and myself as well to continue to negotiate with MDOT, the Road Commission, understanding that we're looking to proceed with the building of this retaining walls during the construction of the bridge, and it may cost the township as much as $135,000.
I'll make that motion.
I'll support.
there's a motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the master plan amendment for public hearing, and Planning Director Johnston is here. Give a brief update since we last discussed.
Good evening, Julie Johnston, Planning Director. So tonight we're before you with the request to consider the master plan update for adoption. Per the requirements of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, the township is required to look at their master plan every 5 years and to make some decisions about whether the plan that they have needs to be updated. So when the Planning Commission took a look at our current master plan, we found that there were some particular items that we thought needed to be updated. So we decided to do an update to the existing plan as opposed to the development of an entire new township master plan. So the intent is for that to be a supplement to the current 2011 master plan, supporting the goals and objectives of that current plan. So ultimately, we created 4 new chapters. a planning driver section, a chapter on rural character preservation, a sub-area plan for the Maple Hill South area, and an update to the future land use plan. So when looking at planning drivers, essentially this is an update to the socioeconomic conditions of the township, as well as looking at national trends and how they might affect the township. So things like population, age, housing trends, all of those types of things were reviewed and then considered when looking at the future land use plan and the updates to the Maple Hill South sub-area plan. And some of the things that we found was that population, household, and family growth is leading to an increased demand for housing in Oshtemo. But that market that's coming into Oshtemo are in their mid-20s and empty nesters in their mid to late 50s who might want to look at some type of different housing stock than what the township currently has the majority of. So looking at some multi-unit, townhome type housing, attached condominiums, or site condominiums on small manageable lots are things that are the types of housing that the township should consider as we move forward. And those low vacancy rates that we have currently in the township make it a tight housing market for us. So one of the questions that came up at our last joint meeting that we had was, what are the number of persons 30 years and younger that might still be living at home? And so I did some investigation for tonight on that so I could answer that question. And I found that, interestingly enough, the township has 12% of that population group living with their parents. And in doing that research, I found that the census has indicated nationally 32% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 are living with their parents. And for the first time in more than 130 years, this age group is more likely to be living at home with their parents than in any other housing situation, which I found fascinating. I'm sure that comes from the economic downturn that we had and that we're still trying to dig ourselves out of. But in Oshtemo, it's 12% of that population group. So moving on to the rural character preservation strategy, this is essentially a chapter that sets out goals and policies and action strategies for the preservation of rural character within that part of the township that's highlighted in the purple on that map. We looked at all of the areas that were zoned rural, residential, and agricultural to create some policies and strategies for. And we came up with essentially 5 goal statements, and under each of those goal statements, we have a set of strategies for the township to consider implementation. Looking at rural development and the services that would be needed for rural development, how to preserve agricultural lands, but also to allow enterprises on those lands, preserving the natural environment and open space and any cultural resources that we have, and also taking into account the recreation in this area of the township. Then we moved on to the Maple Hill Drive South sub-area plan. And according to the 2011 master plan, a sub-area is a area of the township that basically needs deeper evaluation because of particular reasons. And the reasons laid out for the Maple Hill Drive South area is that really it's the last contiguous undeveloped area in this part of the township where we have consistently planned for development and growth. It's in a prime location next to 131 and south of West Main, so the development here will be impactful to the area. And it's also the last real green area in this part of the township. While it's developed as a golf course, so it does have a use, it's not undeveloped open space, it is still the last sort of bastion of green space in this part of the township. So we created a set of goals and principles for the sub-area plan, looking at community life, what type of physical character do we want in the sub-area, the mix of land uses and to ensure that access is multimodal for this area. And the land uses that came out of the sub-area plan are community and open space uses. So we're looking at both private and public type community spaces, allowing retail, office, and technology uses, particularly along the 131 corridor, possibly a town center in a portion of the sub-area where mixed use development could occur, and then also mixed residential. So the idea is that this would be an area for some commercial development, but that it would happen in conjunction with residential and not as a standalone commercial developed property. The other thing we considered when looking at Maple Hill Drive South are the current residential uses located to the south. And the Planning Commission came up with a sort of scheme where intensity and density and massing of buildings would be allowed larger, closer to West Main, and then as you move south, closer to the existing residential, that it would either have to mirror that residential in scale or provide a substantial buffer to protect that residential neighborhood. And then finally, we moved on to the future land use plan. And we just did minor tweaks to the future land use plan. Some of the things that we did, the Planning Commission did recommend changing. We had in 2011 a mixed-use transitional district that allowed both commercial, office, and residential uses. And the Planning Commission felt that the commercial uses allowed in those areas of the township that were designated transitional mixed use wasn't appropriate. So we changed it to a transitional office district, so you could still have that protection and mitigation of compatibility between more residential uses and higher intensity commercial uses, but it would not allow additional retail in those locations. We also added a government public district, and in the past, those areas of the township out in the more rural part of the future land use had what was called a neighborhood node, and it was essentially just a dot on the map that said, hey, some retail uses could happen here to support the more residential districts out in the rural part of the township. Well, we found through rezoning requests that those dots on the map were not super helpful to the Planning Commission in deciding if rezoning should happen and if it was compatible. So we actually defined those areas of neighborhood commercial, and that's that sort of red striped area out in the more rural part of the township. And then finally, we changed the village commercial district to the village core district as an attempt to show that that area is supposed to be mixed use, not just commercial. And then we redefined it a little more closely into the 9th and Stadium area, allowing local commercial to happen on either side, east and west of the village core. So those were the main changes to the future land use plan. And a question came up that we presented to the Planning Commission, well, how much commercial is actually in the township, both zoned and future land use plan, and how, have we future land use planned much more than we needed to because we already have property zoned. So I worked with our GIS specialist to figure out what those numbers were. And commercially, we have 949 acres zoned for commercial, and then mixed use is 162 acres, which equates to 4.36% of the township for commercial and not quite a percentage point for mixed use that's zoned. And then when you look at the future land use, those numbers go up slightly. Mixed use goes up a pretty significant amount of acreage, but of course that can be attributed to the Maple Hill South sub-area plan, which we included in this number as completely mixed use. And then commercial goes up slightly, and again, we think that's because of those defining those neighborhood nodes and allowing for some additional local commercial in parts of the township. The thing that's slightly skewed about the future land use is that it's, it's certainly based on the future land use plan that we're recommending tonight. So it was hard to compare it with the old future land use plan because of that transitional mixed use district, which has changed now and doesn't allow that retail. So anyway, this was an interesting exercise for me as the planning director for the township to understand, well, how much of the township is actually zoned commercial? And when I went to look at the county master plan, the Kalamazoo County master plan, they had some numbers in the plan for property that's actually used as commercial, existing commercial development, not necessarily zoned, which takes into account vacant property. So I found out that we have approximately 752 acres of land that has actually been developed as commercial at this point, which is 3% of the township. And interestingly enough, the Kalamazoo County master plan says that the entire county has 3% of the property that is developed as commercial. So that was kind of an interesting revelation that I found out today when I was doing some research on it. So we kind of fall in line, really, with, from existing development, what's happening in the rest of the county that we're in. So with that, the Planning Commission has reviewed this final draft plan. They did that at their last meeting, and they are recommending approval to the Township Board of this 2017 Master Plan update as presented to you tonight.
Thank you. Any questions? First, I really appreciate all the follow-up on the questions. I know we met with the Planning Commission. We had questions that night, and then Deb and I sat with you and had some other questions. And I appreciate all the work that you put into answering those.
Great.
I wanted to piggyback on Libby's sentiment there and just commend you and staff for doing a great job. And what I really appreciated, Julie, was the example in your leadership and how you really led community involvement all the way through this process. And you've kept us and the board relatively informed the entire way through. You've entertained all of our questions, and we've had a lot. Public comments that have come into, you guys have addressed those relatively in good measure and in good speed. So thank you very much for this, and I think this is a fine example of how we're trying to do better to be more transparent and representative of our community's interests going forward in the planning and development of Oshtemo. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions, or at this time I would open it up for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to address the board this evening about the proposed master plan updates that are before the board? If so, please step to the podium.
My name is Brian Stoltz. I'm a member of the Sky Ridge Neighborhood Watch. The Sky Ridge neighborhood is the only neighborhood that's directly impacted by whatever you do with the Maple Hill sub-area. We, of course, we've worked very closely with Julie, and she's been very cooperative. There are several homes on Sky Ridge that actually abut the golf course, and we asked for a big buffer area there, which it looks like maybe is under consideration. We're not talking about an alleyway, we're talking about green space and trees and maybe a playground, that kind of thing. So we're hoping that'll come through. I live on Driftwood Avenue. Driftwood Avenue is about a quarter of a mile long. It has Drake Road on the east and Green Meadow and the Canterbury Apartments on the west. It used to be a dead-end street, but the township, when they approved the development of Canterbury, the road commission said that our street had to be opened up because we needed 2 access routes for emergency vehicles. And now we're looking at the plan, and once they put through a road from Maple Hill Drive, which looks like it's almost a no-brainer. Also, they're talking about putting a road through from Drake over to Maple Hill Drive between the post office and Country Club Apartments. And so we're talking about 2 new access routes. So our plea is that eventually that Driftwood Avenue would be closed to through traffic. We have 26 homes, all single family. All of our driveways empty into the street. And I have an email from the Director of Transportation for Kalamazoo Public Schools. I asked her how many buses come down our street every day. And she said every school day, there, and she's listed the time of day and everything, 29 school buses come down our street every day. And some of them come back the same way. Imagine looking out your front window wherever you live and seeing 29 buses go by every day. The other thing is when they originally approved the Canterbury Apartments, CATS did a study of how much traffic would come through. And at that time, they said during a rush hour, which would be either 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning or 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon, there would be about 13 cars coming out of the apartment complex. We knew that was almost a joke. I decided to take matters in my own hands. I made a video in front of my house on December the 1st, that's a Friday, from 4:30 to 5:30, 63 cars went by my house. 32 were coming out of the apartments and 31 were going back. Okay, imagine the 29 buses every day and the 62 cars coming through on a rush hour. That's what we've been living with for quite a while. So we're only asking that you take consideration to closing Driftwood Avenue. It's mentioned several times in the master plan. I just wanted to put in our 2 cents worth so people knew what we had been going through for the last 15 years or so. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment this evening? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing and go into board deliberation.
Libby, how is the master plan addendums going to be made publicly available?
They've been on the website for quite some time. As the drafts were developed, those were posted on the website as well.
And that's where they're officially published?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's noticing that's been done in the newspaper through the process. Our neighboring municipalities have been notified by mail of where the plan drafts are, et cetera. They were given a chance to provide input.
And then there'll be hard copies here if people want to request them, and they'll also be online.
Okay.
And there were public meetings held as the drafts were developed. And then the lists of people that attended those meetings or anyone who called was put on a group mailing list, and Julie's been sending them email updates throughout the process. Yeah. So.
I mean, Libby, I don't really have a whole lot of questions. I mean, we've been engaged in this for quite some time, ever since I know I've took the seat on the board. So I'm fairly happy and comfortable with where we're at.
I agree with Ken.
I think there's been a lot of good work by the Planning Commission, and I think the Planning Commission and the participation, I think there's been a lot of back and forth discussion. I appreciate that. The Maple Hill sub-area is the one I have a little bit of concern about. I'm not quite understanding the, I don't know, I don't want to call it a rush because it hasn't been a rush, but the need to do it right now since we rezoned a lot of land north of 43 for commercial. So I have some concerns there, and but I am going to, through all of the back and forth communication that we've had, I'm going to trust that the Planning Commission and their next step is writing the language for this is going to take into consideration the things that this board has set values at in terms of sustainability, best management practices for stormwater. This is an area that drains into the Arcadia headwaters, and we have standing water there now pretty much all the time. I don't think there used to be, so as things have developed, so if we don't address some of this now, and if we're continuing to put more on the land in that watershed, we're going to end up with issues that then we have to deal with ourselves later.
Hey, can I ask one quick, so since a lot of concern from citizens have been not about the master plan in general, but the considerations to the details, like you're mentioning the stormwater in those areas, can you speak a little bit to how the board continues throughout to advise and to make sure that our concerns or our questions are addressed, or is it pretty much up to the Planning Commission now to define those statements? Do they come back to the board for approval?
It's certainly the Planning Commission's charge to define how this plays out in the details, and then that does come back to the board. So, but I guess the point of me speaking on this tonight is to say that I would expect that there be best management practices. I'm not happy that the corner of Drake, we're ending up with township expense for the non-motorized path that's going on Drake Road, that there's a good potential for that. Yeah. And this definitely needs to be avoided in this area. And there will be impacts to Drake Road, to West Main, to the traffic. That road is already well over, I think, bearing capacity for traffic. And, I don't want to, at the end of the day, the township, okay, we got to spend our own money to do this. This is, if this is being developed, the responsibility for this needs to be not come back on the other township residents.
Yeah, because some of our other conversations and work sessions have been around non-motorized transportation and public safety and transport through West Main Corridor. And so you would see that we would have a chance to come back and address those through the follow-ups and continuation.
That's a challenge for the Planning Commission. I am not prescriptive. I'm not sure how to do that.
Okay.
I do have some concern in terms of the vacancy rates. I know there was some acreage provided, but there is vacancy in our commercial. What's land is zoned and then what's been developed, I think it's 24% now in terms of vacant rate. So I do have some concern. I spent a couple hours Saturday morning reading about the current status of the retail. You hear about the retail apocalypse and all of that. And what I read from Harvard Business Review and Forbes and this and that was actually retail did well last year. It was 3 to 4%. However, it was split. The double-digit increases were in the online, not in the more brick and mortar. So they use the word in the articles, cannibalized. So I have some concern that by adding more commercial, I'm not sure what we're doing to our other commercial businesses in the township. But that's, hopefully the Planning Commission has discussed that. Any other comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
So is this, like we said it tonight, for second reading? Is that what we do, or we just adopt it
No,
tonight?
adopt it.
Okay. I would make a motion that we approve the master plan amendment. Oops, I'm sorry. I make a motion that we would accept the master plan amendment.
Support?
There's a motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7 is consideration of the transfer of the Class C SDM liquor license for EOA-O LLC Secola, otherwise known as Jack's Oshtemo. Is this being introduced by you, or is the applicant?
Yes, the applicant is here. Basically, Mangia Pizza and Pasta is closing their doors, but happy to report that Jack's of Oshtemo would be opening up. I believe they have another restaurant in the area. It's Kelly and William Secola. I've reviewed all of the requirements with the new owners, and then we'll be taking over the license that was there, both the Class C and the SDM license, and they will be, an Italian pizza restaurant, and so after reviewing that, I can recommend to the board you have a local government approval resolution attached to your packet, and I believe that Mr. Secola is here if the board has questions.
Jim, question though for you. This is just a transfer of ownership. It's the same location and address?
Same location, but again, our ordinance requires all transfers to be approved by the board. Well, part of that is to make sure that the new owners are complying with the requirements of our ordinance, and they would in fact be serving alcohol as an incidental use to the restaurant.
And can you explain the CSDM?
That's basically what allow them to also sell package. People take wine with them now and other products away from the facility where they didn't used to do that, but they would also have that license as well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Welcome to Oshtemo. I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of the liquor license for Jack's Oshtemo.
I support.
There's a motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
No, roll call.
Aye.
Oh, it's a roll call,
resolution,
sorry. Okay. This is a roll call. Treasurer Culp?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Trustee Ford?
Yes.
Supervisor Heine Coxwell? Yes. Trustee Hudak?
Yes.
Trustee Bushhouse?
Yes.
The motion carries 6-0 with
One
one
absent.
absent. Thank you. Item number 8 is consideration of consultant work and budget amendment for sidewalk design and estimating in the areas of the sanitary sewer Phase 1 projects. And Mark?
Certainly, thank you. Just to remind the board members, you had a work session, I think, 2 meetings ago, where we brought to your attention the opportunity, if you will, to realize efficiencies and economies of scale with respect to orderly growth of the township. Now, just in summary, you've worked long and hard for the past several years to extend sanitary sewers into neighborhoods, and we are now actively working with Fleece and Vandenbrink as our design engineers for the sanitary sewer. And we are proceeding with putting together financing through the USDA Rural Development Program to extend sewers into 5 neighborhoods. The design work is underway, survey work is nearly completed, and the intention is to have design plans the end of this year to bid early next year for next construction season in 2019. What we talked to you in your work session was that this is an opportunity to also possibly extend sidewalks into the neighborhoods. We're not, based upon your discussions, tonight we're not looking at extending sidewalks through the entire neighborhoods, nor are we even looking at sidewalks on both sides, but we are have approached Fleece and Vandenbrink and are looking at possibly extending sidewalks in such a way that each neighborhood would at least have a primary corridor with which they could traverse to connect to the non-motorized facilities elsewhere in the township. So 2 questions this actually raises is, one, we have before, well, let me say, what we have before you now is an engineering proposal from the design consultants to develop these concept plans and also develop cost estimates for the work should the board decide to actually proceed with constructing sidewalks concurrent with the sanitary sewers. Now, as I mentioned, this would not go to bid until early 2019, but what these services would provide you is the information you need to make a decision as to whether you wish to pursue going to construction for certain segments and help you prioritize those. One of the reasons that we need to coordinate this is part of our negotiations with the Rural Development Agency. We need to make sure that the funds for this project are appropriately segregated out so that the grant funding agency it has confidence that the cost for the design work and survey work related to the non-motorized facilities are not being paid for out of the funds loaned to us for the sanitary sewer. So we would actually like to proceed with those discussions and awareness sooner rather than later. But as I say, it's not unusual to do that kind of partnership with them, so I don't expect any problems. So the 2 things that this work that you have before you would do is, one, we would extend the survey work and outside of the current sewer project for those areas where connectors would be needed that would not otherwise be part of the work. And as an example is the connector through the White Gate Farms, bringing that down to West Michigan Avenue, would actually take a little bit additional survey work. And then Beach Street, we've envisioned it'd be appropriate to connect that to West Main Mall Drive and actually extend that West Main Mall so it connects down to West Main Avenue. Mall Drive down to West Main Avenue. So those extents are described in the proposal, so we would be extending the survey data that would be collected, and then based upon the survey data, the engineering firm would develop concept plans and cost estimates for those facilities.
And then, Mark, from that point, once those deliverables are met, and we decide which ones, if any, we want to proceed with, we would still have time to have them into the engineering plans for the work as we rebuild the roads and tear them up for the sewers and rebuild them?
Yes, exactly. So we would, this is set up to reach the same point of having design plans in December this year. So we would get the concept plans back to you in the next couple months so that you'd have some thoughts and then have sufficient time to proceed with the actual detailed design as well.
Okay.
So the goal is to fast track this, to have it go out to bid at the same time as the sewer in December, and to back up from that to get the construction drawings done and to work through the schematics and meet with the neighborhoods as well.
Okay.
So,
And then what are we going to do? Put them in special assessment districts, or how do they pay for it?
And I got a question about that too. I understand Fleece and Vandenbrink helped us with USDA to secure the low-interest financing and the grant funding for the sewer project itself. Is there opportunities for that kind of supplement?
not that I'm aware of from USDA. You know, there could be something coming out of the federal infrastructure discussions. We don't know that right away. These are not MDOT transportation alternative eligible. They're not on primary roads for the most part. I'm not aware of any. Are you?
No, I'm not, but it's a very good question, and really, we did allude to that during the work session, is that simultaneously with getting this work, the board will need to do some additional work to look at funding opportunities, how you would prepare to do that work. Yes, that is an outstanding question that will need to be resolved simultaneously, yes.
But not necessarily a part of the scope of services for what we're talking about with Fleece and Vandenbrink tonight.
No, that's the part of the board
It's
work.
board work.
And I think the board, in the discussion the last time, was pointing toward perhaps a capital millage
Sure.
through the township.
Okay.
Yeah, since the capital plan is completed, which was a big chunk of our work for the last bit, I would like to say that going forward, another big milestone for us in the near future is to have that conversation and engage the public with the likelihood of that infrastructure capital millage idea.
I should also say that Matt Johnson with Fleece and Vandenbrink is here, and say he led us through the planning process to get the USDA loan, and if you have any questions for him as well, I'm sure he could respond to those.
He's here, as well as Jamie Baker, our staff, who's
Yes.
working on, focusing on the non-motorized.
If I could ask, why did we select these areas over other areas of non-contiguous sidewalk or public transportation or non-motorized?
Well, the detailed work plan lists the 5 areas that we're extending sewer. With respect to the locations, we had staff meeting, myself, Jamie Libby, Karen King, Parks Director, and Matt as well sat in, volunteered his time, and we kind of looked at, based on our understanding of the neighborhood and some of the challenges. One of the challenges might have been, well, the mailboxes are all on one side. It's a little easier to build the sewer on side A rather than side B. Another consideration was sunlight. The north side sidewalks would get more sun, so they would melt snow a lot quicker. So we did some practical ideas such as that.
Was your question not just these streets, but why these streets over any other street in the township?
Yes, initially, but I liked Mark's approach to that answer because when I was asking that, I realized these neighborhoods, because these are part of Phase 1 sewer development.
Yes.
Which I realized that as I was asking it, so.
And we should see cost savings while they're mobilized for the other heavy sewer construction to construct the sidewalks. Significant cost savings.
Absolutely.
Maybe as much as we'd see in a grant. If we, I mean, not that we.
Of what? You said?
Maybe it's, I mean, we figure that the grants save us about 60%. So we would, I'm being facetious, we would still get more if we had a grant, and we'll still pursue that if there is something available, but it's not looking promising at this time.
Okay.
I think this is a great idea. Another example of this board trying to get the most out of the township's tax dollars. So I support measures like these every time.
Is there any public comment on this evening?
Hi, I'm Karen Curtis. I'm from the Sky Ridge Group, as you guys know. All the people I've talked to in Sky Ridge don't want sidewalks, not to make your life more difficult, but they don't. We haven't had them all this time. Many people do not want to have to worry about shoveling them in the wintertime, for one thing, when you're talking about practicality. There are some of us that already have people going down our street, racing, taking things out of our mailboxes, all those kind of things. We really don't want to encourage those people to be closer to us. There are some that feel that we would be paying for sidewalks that the vast majority of the people in our neighborhood would never use. And so I hope we get some input before you decide to build them for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. So we're looking for a motion to, in consideration to authorize this consultant contract for this sidewalk initial planning and estimating, surveying, planning, and estimating work.
So moved.
I might add that there's also a budget amendment attached to this.
Yeah,
You add
so
that?
moved. The budget amendment was what, $35,000?
Yep.
Yes, not to exceed 35,000.
Okay. There's a motion. I will support that. Any further discussion? I will say I appreciate the comment tonight, and I think we do need to meet with the neighborhoods. I have had requests from that neighborhood from a digitally impaired family, person with some individuals that does want the sidewalk, so I think it is tricky to balance that, though. So,
Motion and support?
there's a motion and support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Any other township business? Yes.
I would just ask our illustrious deputy over there to give a short thing about what people should look for with their mailboxes.
Thank you. At our earlier meeting, the question came up by trustee Hudak about, we've had a rash of mail thefts in the Kalamazoo area. And one of the questions was, what is the report that we've had? We identified approximately 25 people of interest that have gone through the Kalamazoo County area, the Allegan County area, city of Portage, city of Kalamazoo, and they're taking mail out of individuals' mailboxes. These individuals have been identified as persons of interest, and local law enforcement, along with federal investigators, are looking at making contact with these individuals. We have had some individuals have been federally charged, and we'll go through the federal court system for this. One of the ways we can protect ourselves in your mail is that if you are expecting mail, that you know that you're getting a credit card that you've had updated and it's going to be, try to check your mail as soon as possible, have someone else look out for it. Also, I'll tell your neighbors to look out for anyone that looks suspicious coming through the area and maybe stopping at mailboxes. Get a description of the vehicle and call 911 immediately. So if we have an officer in the area, we can try to stop that. If you have outgoing mail that has, whether it's mail order or money or something or checks in there, it would probably at this time be best to maybe find a secure mailbox, drop it off at the post office itself. Do not leave your mail in your mailbox overnight with your flag up. That's just a red flag for some of these individuals to come in and check your mailbox. But be vigilant, be observant, and not only look out for yourself, look out for other neighbors as well, and know who your mailman is. If you have a mailman on foot, make sure they're in uniform. If you have a mailman that drives a privately owned vehicle, make sure you know what vehicle it is, and if you see anything suspicious, definitely call your local law enforcement or 911 immediately to report it. Any questions from?
Sure, thank you. And I wanted to add one thing. The United States Postal Service also has a free service where you can sign up online that will take a picture of the mail that's being delivered to you that day. So that as you're waiting for that credit card to come in, if you get your email alert that shows it, you'll know it's being delivered that day. So you can keep an eye out for it and know relatively quickly if it's been taken from you. So, and that's available by the United States Postal Service. So
I got one other thing on the lines of credit card uses. Within the last several weeks, we've had individuals, if you've seen on 131, there's a digital billboard. There's been some persons of interest, that's what we like to call them, we can't call them suspects, that we'd like to talk to, but we've had a rash of credit card information from ATMs that has been stolen also. One of the biggest things you can do is when you are using an ATM machine, look and see if anything is attached to it because they're attaching scanners to it, but also look because they're attaching very thin micro cameras that are capturing your PIN numbers when you're taking money out of the ATM. So one of the things you can do is still use your other hand and shelter your numbers. It's a good practice to do if you're using a debit card, whether it's at a store or an ATM, because someone could be behind you looking at this information also. If they get it on the scanner, they need that 4-digit number to also pre-program, because what they're doing is getting your digital information and then making their own credit cards through credit card scanners and making that magnetic strip. So it's pretty complicated, but there's some ways you can protect yourself, and that is protect that PIN number. If you see an ATM machine that looks strange, or you see a camera or a hole drilled, maybe that's something, maybe go to another one and maybe report it to your bank as soon as possible, because they're only leaving these scanners on for approximately 8 to 12 hours. Most of the time it's when the businesses aren't open, and then they come back and they gather that scanner with all that data in it, and then they sell it or use it to manufacture their own credit cards in your name. So it's a lot of work, but they make a lot of money off of your hard-earned money. So just kind of a little tick there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Falk. Board member comments? I have one. I forgot to state this under the master plan amendment. Dusty asked that I express for her apologies for not being present this evening. She is away at a clerk's institute, and she wants to express appreciation for those who contributed to the master plan and express her support for the plan that was submitted and before the board this evening. That's it. I believe we have exhausted our agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.